welcome to another episode of the Hubscale podcast. This week's amazing guest is Brandon Hoe, VP of Marketing at Oxeye. Brandon, it's great to have you on.
It's my pleasure, Connor. Thank you so much.
I guess for our listeners who don't know much about you or Oxeye, can you give a quick introduction?
Yeah, really quickly, a little bit about me. I was originally born and raised in Malaysia, but I've been here in the United States for over 20 years now. Started my career as an engineer, very painfully doing writing code in assembly language, and anyone who knows that will know how painful it is. I made a switch in my careers by first going to business school and then moving into product management and product marketing. Then ran my own marketing agency for about 10 or 11 years, where I worked primarily with small to mid-sized companies and startups, as well as up to Fortune 100 companies, helping them out with their marketing, their storytelling. Eventually, I kind of fell into the cybersecurity landscape by happenstance. A friend of mine was the chief operating officer of a cybersecurity startup, and he said, "Hey, we really need help with marketing. Is this something you're interested in talking about?" And then lo and behold, I ended up in a CMO position there, which was the first step in a number of steps in the cybersecurity sphere, if you will. Oxeye is an application security startup that I head marketing for right now. I've been here at the company since mid-September. It's based in Tel Aviv, even though I'm based here on the East Coast of the United States. We're at seed stage, and we're doing something that I consider very revolutionary. Although the challenge, of course, is trying to cut through all the noise in a well-established space and get the word out there that what we're doing is legitimately helping people to improve their application security, but more importantly, just their lives, because we're eliminating a lot of the nonsense and the inefficiencies that have really pervaded application security and have become so commonplace that people don't really pay attention to it anymore.
A lot of companies are neglecting it, unfortunately, but no, hopefully with your work you're doing with Oxide that you can shed some light on that and help some fantastic customers out. But no, perfect. Thank you for that introduction, Brandon. It's an extraordinary career going from engineering to product marketing to managing your own marketing business to now four startups, being the first market leader in four
Yeah,
startups.
yeah.
It's yeah, I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about talk about a bit more about them early days and how it led you to where you are.
When you say early days, you're talking my own life, or
It can be early, let's say, yeah. How
yeah.
did it get to where you are?
By a very circuitous route and through a stroke of extraordinary luck. I grew up in a lower middle class family in Malaysia, never imagining that I would be able to afford to come to the United States to attend university here. I did extremely well in high school. I mean, it's high school. It's not that big a deal. But I was fortunate that I managed to get. My parents couldn't afford to send me to university, even in Malaysia. It was just we just couldn't afford it. And through an extraordinary, like I said, stroke of luck, my dad happened to run across the CEO of the company that he was working for. Told him my story, and the guy said, "Come into my office and let's chat." And he altered the course of my history by offering me a full ride to go to college, first in Malaysia and then here in the United States. In fact, I told my wife this story, and when we had to name our first daughter, uh, she suggested that we actually name our daughter after the guy, the CEO. So he's left a legacy that beyond himself that he's not aware of, unfortunately, because he passed away a few years ago.
That's uh, that's an exceptional. Like you say, you never even thought you could live in the US, let alone afford college.
Yeah,
And you
precisely. Yeah, and I mean, growing up in a family where resources were scarce, financial resources were scarce, you just learn to develop a hustle, man, a hustle mindset, where you try to make things happen regardless of what you have. And uh, I think it's helped me a lot first in running my own business, and then ultimately, in the early stage startups that I've been a part of. And I think that that's really important when you are at an early stage startup, because typically, unless you're, you are an anomaly and have raised a large amount of funding, you just need to apply creativity and energy and resourcefulness to whatever you're doing in order to get stuff done. And I think that my background, I mean, it's not one I would have chosen personally, but it certainly helped me in accomplishing whatever little I've accomplished so far in the roles that I've had.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I say, I think you do need that hustle, especially in that startup environment, because if you unless, like you say, an anomaly and you've created that much
Absolutely.
funding, it is a struggle and it's a hustle day in day out. And if you don't have that about you, you're not really going to make it realistically. But no, perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. And obviously, you kind of fell into cybersecurity. I think it's the same vice versa with me. I fell into cybersecurity, and that's a space I definitely wouldn't want to leave because it is actually so exciting when you do get involved into it.
I agree with
But
you.
yeah, but with the current market conditions right now, I know it's a crazy place at the moment. But what could you recommend companies should be doing to stand out with their marketing?
Oh gosh. I think fundamentally the fundamentally the product has to be good. The product has to be sound. Whatever you're selling, whether it's a product or a service, has to provide value.
Hmm.
And it in this environment where you've seen it, you see a lot of retrenchments, a lot of people getting laid off, and so on and so forth. A lot of budgets being cut and or compressed or frozen. The ability to show that the value exceeds what people are paying for it, the ability to say that, I can help you cut costs, I
Hmm.
can help you become more efficient. And those are things that I don't think it necessarily are because of marketing. It's built into the product or the service, but being able to communicate that message in in an effective way and in an efficient way, I think is really crucial at this point in time.
Yeah, no,
Uh, the,
yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say? Were you going to say anything else?
yeah, the funding landscape looks pretty bleak for most companies.
Yeah.
And I think, also what's really important is being able to be very resourceful and efficient with the whatever budgets you do have. So I think any marketer out there who wants to be successful has to keep those things in mind as they approach whatever their tactics and their campaigns and so on and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Like I say, there is a lot of noise, especially specifically in AppSec right now, and to have clear that clear message you're giving out to the customers and that vision, so it stands out quite well. Obviously, with funding drastically dropping compared to the recent years from VC firms, that is something
Yes.
they definitely need to be aware with how they can monetize their money the correct way for the marketing budget and everything else. So no, perfect. Thank you
Yeah,
for clearing that.
I don't think people should cut their marketing entirely. This is
No.
actually the best time to continue to market when everyone else is pulling back on marketing spend and marketing tactics, but just have to be smarter about how you deploy your resources. And I think that, going back to uh, what we talked about earlier about my background, when you don't have much to work with, you develop a natural tendency to be hyper resourceful and hyper efficient with whatever you do have, and I think that that's helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it definitely is helpful. And 4 times first market leader in startups, you must have some fantastic advice and tips for people coming into their first marketing leader position. What tips would they be for people moving into that position?
I would say that first of all, before they even accept a marketing leadership role, if they're in the position to do so, and I say this because I've been fortunate in that I've had the luxury of being able to kind of pick and choose my roles, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, Not always well, but I've been fortunate enough to do that. But if you are in a position to make I guess, a more deliberate decision about where you take your talents and your energies, I would say the first thing is make sure that the organization that you are a part of actually believes in the marketing function.
Hmm.
Often, an early startup founder or co-founders don't have a true understanding of what marketing entails, and they automatically assume that marketing equals a large volume of leads immediately that their sales team can close on. And that's not the case, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So marketing is, uh, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to go off on a slight tangent and talk a little
Yeah.
bit about my philosophy about marketing, first of all. And it's informed very much by a conversation that I was, I guess, not really a conversation, but an interview that I was a part of when I ran my marketing agency with the VP of sales at AT&T at the time. And what he said really stood out to me and is really the core of how I approach marketing, which is that marketing is effectively sales at scale. He said in the early days, AT&T could afford to hire as many salespeople as as there were customers, and then eventually they got to a point where the number of customers then exceeded their ability to actually hire salespeople because it got prohibitively expensive. So that's when they started to shift towards marketing. And that's my philosophy about marketing, which is that we are conducting sales at scale. What does
Yeah.
that translate to? One, if you're going to be an effective salesperson, you always have to be respectful of the potential customer. You always have to be mindful and empathetic to their needs. You always have to be respectful in how you communicate with them and conduct business with them. And so I apply those same, I guess, fundamental underpinnings and try to multiply that the scale of doing that. And as you can imagine, that's really, really very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece of advice that I'd say, that I'll give is like find an organization that aligns with what you believe marketing to be. That's I would only share my opinion and my philosophy. That's just one guy's opinion. But there has to be alignment between their expectations and what you believe you bring to the table. If there is not an alignment, then really you should step away from the opportunity if you can. The second is don't it's and I think this happens very frequently at early stage companies where a first marketing leader comes on board. It's either in most cases it's the first marketing hire that's or first marketing leader is someone who's been given an opportunity to take a step up, if you will. And there's a natural tendency to look at all the things that other people company have done or other companies have done and say, hey, if it worked for them, maybe we should just follow their playbook and follow suit. And that's really the biggest, I think, the biggest mistake you can make. Now, we've talked about football in the past. I know you like cricket, so I'm going to try to talk about it in terms of cricket. But let's say you could look back in history and you could assemble an all-star team. And I'm gonna date myself here because these are the only names I know. But if you could get Ian Botham, if you could get Graham Gooch, Imran Khan, Shane Warne, all on one team, the way you approach your tactics will be fundamentally different than if you had a secondary school team.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. You should not, you should really tailor your marketing based on the type of assets that you have. And sometimes it could be the amount of money that you have at your disposal. Sometimes it could be your investor network or your co-founder's personal network. It could be the people in your organization who have exceptional talents or skills, or who have. I worked with someone in my last role who was very, very well known because he worked. He was outed by I think it was a Chinese hacker group in the Stuxnet. If you're not familiar with it, I suggest you look it up. It's one of the probably the most elaborate uh, and really ambitious like hacking hacking activity like that is publicly known. But we took advantage of the fact that he was a well-known figure. So again, if you're when you're stepping into a role, you need to take stock of all the things, all the assets you have at your disposal, and then plan accordingly. You can't just say that, hey, I'm gonna be the next Wiz and do exactly what Wiz has done, and that just doesn't work. So I would say that those are the two main pieces of advice I would give to someone who's stepping into a marketing role at an early stage startup or into a first marketing leadership role at a company.
No, perfect. That analogy was fantastic from my side. So I really do appreciate putting it into
Yeah, that was
cricket
just for
terms.
you. Most people who listen to this will probably have
They
no idea who I'm talking
they'll have no
what we're
idea
talking
about
about.
them names.
But I'll give a football analogy instead. If you could assemble a team with Lionel Messi and Ronaldo and Neymar and I don't know who else in one team, you would the tactics that you would employ are very different from those if you were playing in in a Division 2 team or something like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it makes total sense. Like you say, there's no one master playbook which fits every company perfectly. There might be little bits to be able to take from bits you've done at another company before, and or even moving from obviously you've done this 4 different times now at 4 different companies.
And
What you did
every
at
single
one
time it's been
company,
different. Yeah.
exactly. So one thing won't work, what it might work for a different company. So like I say, you've always got to be readapting that and revamping your ideas. And like I say, take a note down of all your resources you actually have before you outline your vision and plan for that. So no, perfect. Thank you for that advice, and it's really appreciated. And now I know obviously we mentioned earlier you started off as an engineer. What actually made you decide to pursue a career in marketing instead of engineering?
I'll tell you this. The reason I started off in an engineering role to begin with was based on need. I had an opportunity to go to university to attend engineering school on a full scholarship. And although my heart wasn't fully into it, I saw that as an opportunity to position myself for whatever was next. So, when you do what you need to survive, and to take, and to eventually get to your goals, and that's what I did. In terms of marketing, I never really truly, excuse me, considered it as a career. I always thought I was going to end up as a photojournalist.
Right?
Um, I, I I like the idea of telling stories. I like exploring people's lives, and I love photography. And it was, for me, that seemed like the natural thing to do when I started out in my, I guess in my early career. But I also understand that one, photojournalism is an extremely taxing and difficult job. And I admire those people who do it and who do it well. And it also, unfortunately, doesn't, it's not a financially lucrative pursuit.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be able to balance my desire to make a meaningful living for myself. I don't care about being rich necessarily, but I'd like to live a comfortable life
Yeah.
and also pursue things that interest me. And marketing seemed like and product management actually, because I got to build things, seemed like a good fit for my interests at the time. I've moved away from the product management bit, of course, but marketing still, it's evolving continually, and it just keeps me interested.
Yeah, no, perfect. No, thank you for clearing it up. Like I say, sometimes you've got to do what you got to do, and that was the best opportunity you had to be able to pursue something further down the line or progress your career down a different avenue. So no, perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. And like I say, yeah, sometimes I'm guessing you enjoyed engineering as well at the same time. It just wasn't where your heart was fully invested in.
I would say, given what I was doing at the time, I did not really enjoy engineering.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, I bet that was a struggle then going studying it, but like I say, it's got landed to where you are today. So you've got to be grateful and thankful for,
Yeah,
well,
it's
thankful for
it's
yourself
easy
for
to look
doing that.
back on it's easy to look back in hindsight and say it was just a step that I took, but at the time it was, it was a struggle.
Yeah.
I knew pretty early on that I was never going to be even a good engineer.
But no, perfect. Thank you for that. And obviously, as that was a struggle, I'm guessing throughout your career, there's been a lot of challenges. And what are some of the challenges you've actually faced since being in a marketing leader role?
Um, there have been different ones over the years based on the different, I guess, companies that I've been a part of. I've been a part of a bootstrapped company that was acquired. Um, I've been a part of like an organization that had an all-star team, and that presented its own set of challenges. And I've been a part of an organization where the owner of the company just wasn't really that interested in scaling the company. So that was a very interesting experience too.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I don't know that there's like a single good answer to your question.
It's not a problem for startups being the first market leader at all four. I'm curious to know why you keep going for that, or yeah, what is your fascination in that in startup life?
It's the pace. It's the pace. I think more than anything, I consider myself an optimist.
Hmm.
And when you look at startups, you see a world of opportunity ahead of you.
Yeah.
You see and imagine and envision ways that you can have a small part in helping to change the world, if you will. Granted, these are like microscopic changes. Most people will never hear about Oxide. Most people will never have the slightest clue what we do or care for that matter. But for those who do, I genuinely, and I'm gonna just restrict my description to Oxide here because that's the role that I'm in. We see how we can actually impact people's lives and make it slightly better. What does that translate to? It means more time for them to focus on the things that they really want to do, more time for them to actually be able to go home on time instead of like dealing with nonsense that appears out of nowhere. More less stress, less and hence less burnout. Um, So in these like microscopic ways, I mean, and when I say microscopic, I mean I look at the entirety of human existence. It's the changes that we are making and helping to enable are just tiny compared to all of humanity.
Hmm.
But the reality is we can make a difference. And if when you have thousands of companies, startups, creators, founders who are doing the same thing, in aggregate, all of a sudden, these microscopic improvements in other people's lives all add up and they change the world. And although again, this is a tiny component of everything, ultimately, I feel like I have an impact. I've worked at large organizations. The largest company I've worked for had I think had 230,000 employees at that point in time when I worked there, probably more now. And when you go to work, you don't really feel like you're accomplishing anything.
Yeah.
And you feel like you are this not even a cog in the whole machine. You're less than that. You might be half a tooth on a cog of a wheel that that exists in a much larger machine,
Hmm.
and you can be taken out and replaced
Quite
anytime,
easily. Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah. Here, in an organization like this, where there are only 20 plus of us, if I was taken out, the impact would be significant. But on the flip side, which is what really want to focus on, the changes and the positive things that I do, and hopefully there are more positives than negatives because marketing is a lot about experimentation and trying different things. Hopefully, the net gain is results in something meaningful for us,
Mhm.
and that helps us to accomplish our goals. So
Yeah.
that's why I do what I do.
No, perfect. No, that's thank you for clearing up. That's awesome. Like I say, Hubscale, we're a startup ourselves, and it attracted me to it because, like I say, I'm highly optimistic about the future. And when you do go to a startup, the the world is your oyster. You don't know how it's going to change. You don't know what you're going to be like in a year time, 2 years time, even three down the road. Whereas you do go to a larger organization, you are just, like I say, a tooth or a part of a cog. You're just a number on a spreadsheet, which you're not making
Precisely.
any
Yeah.
impact. And like I say, you're easily replaced. Whereas you come to a startup, and it is more exciting. It feels more like a team slash family environment, which you can all get behind the whole vision, and you're all aligned on one specific journey and what you're trying to achieve, which is
And
fantastic.
the reality is, Connor, it's where you spend the majority of your time.
Exactly.
So it has to be meaningful to you. It has to, you know, it has to fit within like what you believe is important to you.
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Of course you do. Like you say, money's important, but for me, and I guarantee for most people out there, like say, you spend 8, 9, 10 hours, sometimes depending on what role or what day it is,
Yeah.
12-hour days. Do you want to spend half your life in a company or an organization you're not inspired by or don't even want to work there or enjoy your time? No, you'd rather work for a
Yeah,
team
life's too
environment.
short for that, man. Of
It
course, it's
definitely is.
easy. It's easy to say when the market is flush with jobs and that everybody's gainfully employed and all that. But in an ideal scenario, as if you're not happy in your current role, and there are opportunities to move somewhere else where you believe you can do something that's more aligned with your interests or more aligned with your ethos or what you expect from an employment situation, then
Mhm.
strongly encourage people to move on. And it's only something that you can actually see in retrospect. I mean, I look back on my career that spans over 2 decades, and I can say that now. I would not have said this 20 years ago when I was just hoping not to lose my job by screwing up, by not screwing up. So,
No, perfect. And a little bit more about Oxide. Obviously, we mentioned earlier, VP of Marketing. You've been there just over 9 months now. Can you talk a bit more about your journey since joining Oxide?
yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I'm the first marketing hire. In fact, I'm still the only marketing person, the full, only dedicated marketing person. We have an agency that helps us with graphic design in our website. And then as and when necessary, I pull in contractors to perform, specific needs that we have. It's a really, really interesting place to be because, for a number of reasons. One, we're very optimistic about what we're doing. We legitimately believe that the work that we're doing and the product that we're building has a material impact on business as well as on people's lives.
Hmm.
And I'm driven partially by that vision. Also driven partly by the fact that I get to experiment a lot. I work with uh, the two co-founders and our VP of product in the exec team, and I work for an Israeli company, so they're very direct, first of all, which is amazing.
Yeah,
I love that. They're also very open to trying different things. And also, while they'll push back if they see something that they don't understand or don't necessarily agree with, at a fundamental level, I know that they trust me to do my work, and that they trust me to do what's best in the interest of the company. So that experience has been amazing, and it's also given me an opportunity. And this is really interesting. I grew up Catholic. I grew up going to Sunday school, learning about the Bible and all the historical references. But a lot of the most of it is based has references that, or sorry, has stories and places and people that are based, in Israel. So I've had an opportunity to travel to Israel twice now, and actually got to go to Jerusalem in December last year, and seeing all these things that I read about or saw pictures, not even pictures, but drawings of when I was growing up, come to life has been an incredible experience. So it's the sum of my different experiences related to work, my professional interests,
mhm,
being able to I guess bring to life the lessons that I learned as a young Catholic boy, and also being able to work with people who are aligned in focus and in the direction, and who have a tremendous amount of for whom we have a tremendous amount of mutual respect is has been an incredible experience so far. Yeah.
perfect. No, thank you for telling that. Like I say, I'm quite jealous you got to visit Jerusalem. We went to Cybertech in Tel Aviv in January, and
Nice.
unfortunately didn't get chance to go there. So next year, yes, I'll definitely be attending and visiting Jerusalem, definitely. But no, thank you for mentioning that. And with Voxai now, what does the future look like? What are the plans for the future?
Try to grow the company as well as we can. And growth is not necessarily just about acquisition of customers,
Hmm.
but also building out a team uh, that is culturally aligned. And when I say culture, I refer more to how we treat people, how we listen and pay attention to what our customers and potential customers are saying, how we approach the process of sharing our message and trying to cut through the noise in how we respond to our existing customer base as well as respond to potential customers. I think the focus is only on those things. We believe that if we do those things right, we have a product that has a very, like I mentioned, I've said this earlier, has a legitimate value proposition. I've worked at organizations where it's the the product or the messaging was stronger than the actual product. I'll just leave it at that. And we believe that the future is very bright for us. Application security is not going to go away.
No,
In fact, there's an increasing amount of attention being paid to it. On one hand, like the supply chain security, SBOM type stuff, which is something that we do, but also about fundamentally about securing your applications and make sure that um, they're not susceptible to attackers, to successful attacks.
no, yeah, no, perfect. Quite looking forward and excited to see what the future holds of Oxeye. Obviously, now I know we got to meet face to face at RSA, which was
Did.
fantastic. You're actually a lot taller in person than before.
Yes, I am. Yep.
It's not
Most
hard to
people are
compete against me.
surprised by that. Yeah.
But I'm curious to know because I've attended 3 conferences this year now, and obviously they do cost a lot of money to attend. And if you're in your position, have a booth, how would you actually track or track your ROI on conferences like RSA?
We are fortunate in that we are an early stage startup still, and as a result, we get to attend conferences like RSA. I'll speak about RSA in particular. We were in the early stage expo, so the financial investment was relatively low compared to some of the other conferences that we've been to. Um, how we track ROI is very simple. Does it turn into a legitimate does our attendance there have a direct impact on the opportunities that we create that we can directly point to RSA and say this was either the immediate source of this opportunity, or if it was greatly influenced by this opportunity, because we may have made initial contact with someone else in the past,
Hmm.
but if it hasn't, if it's the opportunities kind of like faltered or just remained dormant, but it's been resuscitated because we had a one-on-one meeting in RSA, then I would say we would attribute that to RSA. Uh, and the ROI is very simple. We know how much it costs financially, uh, and what do we get out of it in return in terms of dollars and cents from a sale. It's still too early yet because the sales cycles are relatively long, and even within opportunities that we have right now, we've seen like a deceleration in the process just because of budget freezes and things like that, or resource constraints.
Hmm.
So ROI, yeah, that's a relatively simple one.
No, I was just curious to know because some of them booths, especially downstairs in the main hall,
Oh yeah,
were yeah, it was it's
I
extortionate, but
I've
just
talked to some of my peers who were there, and in fact I talked to someone. I'm not going to name the company because I don't want to out her, but I talked to someone with a very, very impressive booth. And she said that the booth itself cost them $250,000. Granted, they use it for, at multiple shows,
Mhm.
for a number of years, so it depreciates, they amortize the cost over multiple uses. But still, $250,000 for just a booth. I mean, I would love to have that as my annual budget.
But they've got to track their RI quite specifically and focus
Yeah.
on that
I,
definitely.
I think it becomes really, really difficult to track your ROI unless RSA, and I have a friend who was also at RSA, at a different company, and she says that the vast majority of their opportunities comes from RSA. They don't, I think if I remember correctly, she said that anywhere from 60 to 70% of the annual opportunities can be directly be attributed to RSA. So then it
Wow.
becomes a lot easier to track.
Yeah.
But if you have a large booth, like I don't know if you saw the Wiz booth or the
Yeah.
Sentinel One booth. I mean, it's really, really challenging.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I went to the Wiz booth. They had Meet the Wizard
Yeah,
with a guy,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
which it did attract a lot of
yeah.
people there.
And
I
then
went
your own
there,
custom
definitely.
sneakers too. I should have done that. In retrospect, I should have done that.
There's always next year.
Yeah.
And perfect, obviously, meeting face to face is fantastic, but working remote life has definitely accelerated over since COVID. Obviously,
Hmm.
it's a fantastic, we get to do this, you're on the other side of the world to me, which is fantastic. What are your actual thoughts on working remote?
This is a really good question. I've worked remotely, if in essence, for gosh, 14, 13 or 14 years now, because I
Wow.
ran my own company. And I've worked the v- I'd say half of the contractors that I worked, I didn't have any employees. I never wanted employees, but half of the people that I worked with were somewhere else in the world, and almost everyone else who was domestic lived somewhere else. And even if they didn't, even if they lived an hour or two away, it would be easier to just hop on a phone call
Yeah.
or that at the time Skype, was just a lot easier. I do think that there's something that's lost in um, in the in fully remote work environments.
Hmm.
I think that there are these tiny little creative collisions, if you will, that happen when you run into someone just by chance as you're going to the loo or walking back from it, or being able to just walk to someone's desk and say, "Hey, I need to talk about this." I think those things really add up in ways that we cannot really quantify.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you look at Apple, I think they understand that implicitly, and that's why there's huge push to get everyone back into the office.
Mhm.
I don't think it's only because they've spent what $5 billion on the spaceship campus, but I think they understand that it's more than that. And I say this because I read a book about how they it's about Pixar actually, but it's somewhat related because of Steve Jobs. And but they found that um the space and how they constructed the space and how they constructed even meeting rooms was really, really made a big difference in terms of productivity and not just productivity, but the ability to innovate and create better. So when you are working remotely like this, where you are truly one-dimensional at this point,
Hmm.
I again I cannot quantify it. It's just a gut sense. Um, and maybe it's an antiquated belief, but I really believe that being close to your coworkers, having more than just, a lot of these interactions are very transactional, right?
Hmm.
You're not meeting to talk about social stuff. You're trying to get work done, and then you basically, okay, I'm done. I don't want to be on Zoom anymore.
Yeah.
And I think all those things add up when you work together in person.
Yeah, it definitely does. I completely agree with you. I think working remote has an aspect to play because it does mean you can, like say, we can have this conversation right now instead of trying to come to America to do the podcast with you. And
Yeah,
obviously, we're headquartered in Dubai as well, so we've got a headquarters in Manchester and Dubai, which it does make it difficult sometimes. Like if you have people around you, you're bouncing ideas off each other. If you're working from remote, obviously we do that to an aspect, but not every day. I physically can't do it because when you're having them difficult days or you're struggling and you've got no one
yeah.
to bounce off or even motivate you to carry on with the day, it does get deflating. So yeah, I think it does have an aspect to
Absolutely.
play.
I mean,
But
you bring up an excellent point. I think that social support is completely missing right now.
mm, yeah, definitely, 100% isn't it? It's not even that. It's like for example, sometimes when you're writing out an email or anything like that, it's oh, can you have quickly come over and have a look over it instead of
Yeah.
sending it to someone who's miles and miles away and waiting an hour or two for them to reply. You lose that urgency as well, which slows you down.
And I read something really interesting which recently, which is that productivity from in work from home or remote workers has actually decreased.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see
this is
that.
in this is in contrast to, around the time just after the pandemic, everyone was saying that productivity actually increased. So I think people, just adjusted, immediately after, in the aftermath of the pandemic. I mean, everyone was like, "Oh, I don't know how to separate my life and work anymore. I used to commute 2 hours, and now I have like an extra hour of or 2 hours to like commit to work." And I think people have come to the realization that, hey, this is my time. I'm
Yeah,
reclaiming my time, if you will. And I think that's how, I think that's how why we've seen the shift.
yeah. Oh no, definitely. It's like even me when I started at Hubscale, we was fully remote, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Manchester. I was waking up, putting some clothes on, a nice top, so no one can see
Yeah,
what your pants you're wearing on Zoom, and then sitting in my kitchen all day, and then turning my laptop off, and you kind of don't have that separation. I like to have the office area. You go there, you do your work, you walk back out, and you
yeah.
forget about that. And it's your time to do what you want to enjoy. You don't have that actual switch off where work is from home, which it does get difficult. So no, I think working from home 1 or 2 days a week has definitely a factor to play, because sometimes when you are in an office, it can get quite easily distracting having them conversations with your colleagues. But then when you do go home, if you have the separation, you can get that deep work done when you're on your own. Perfect.
Hmm.
But there's nothing like meeting face to face. Like say, this is fantastic what we're doing now, but it was even better to meet you in person, and it probably increased our relationship a lot more by doing meet in person.
Yeah, happy hours via Zoom is not the same as happy
It's not the same.
hours in person.
But like you say, obviously, companies still are working remote. Quite a lot of them are fully remote. From your experience throughout the past, how do you actually manage teams remotely and keep everyone aligned to the same vision?
That's a challenging part. I think by meeting, for me, one thing I like to do is to meet frequently. I shouldn't say frequently, but regularly. As a fundamental rule, it's part of my philosophy. If I've hired someone, I trust them to do the work. I'm not going to micromanage them. I'm not going to look over their shoulders and track their activities. I know that some companies and some organizations have these things where people have to check in by like count, like they install software that tracks their workers' productivity and all that. I'm like, I really don't care. Um, I've done enough in the realm of marketing to understand what productivity looks like and what that translates to in terms of output. So for me, it's easier to tell if someone is slacking off, or if, there's some, and it's not just slacking off. That people have lives, right? I mean, people get sick, people have children that they need to attend to their needs and all that. So I'm sensitive to that as well. But checking in regularly, even if it's just a Zoom chat or a Zoom huddle, having a weekly meeting, making sure that every single week we have a meeting where everyone discusses what they've done over the last week, what they plan to do the following week, what help they need from someone else within the team in order to accomplish their goals or to fix a problem or challenge that they're facing. Those are some of I guess the things that I do to try to maintain productivity in a remote work environment. And I've been a part of uh, I think three organizations right now where I've had to do that. So you know, I'm sure it can always be improved, but for the most part, I think I've managed pretty well so far.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, when you're hiring people underneath you, uh, you've got to have that trust, especially working remote. I think that's the best way to manage and lead and actually get people happy. Because personally, from my experience, I wouldn't want software on my laptop because it just kind of demotivate me. And people saying, "Oh, if you take all your KPIs or specific
Yeah,
targets, yes, you need to be able to track stuff for yourself." But I don't want someone telling me when you've got all that. It kind of makes it that you do this and that is it. Whereas you leave them. you hire someone because of their expertise and experience. So you've got to give them that trust, to be able to get on with the job, what they need to do.
Yeah.
And if they're not, you'll find out soon enough if they're lying to you or anything like that.
I mean, if you want a robot, buy a robot.
Yeah, ChatGPT is going to be soon in robot form soon, so you'll be able to just have one there.
Yeah. I was only half joking there.
Like Tesla carries on the way it's going. Elon will have them AIs out soon enough.
Yeah.
Hopefully not, 'cause that does scare me a little bit. But no,
We just have to evolve, I guess, in terms of what we end up contributing to society as humans.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully it's not that. What's that Will Smith film I, Robot? Hopefully
I
nothing like that
robot.
happens.
I actually have not watched that movie, so
It's a fantastic
maybe I
movie, to
should.
be fair.
Yeah.
Yes. And Brandon, no, thank you for all the information so far today. It's been I really enjoyed this podcast and this discussion. But throughout your career or even outside work life, what is some of the best advice you've been given and why?
Oh gosh. I, it's funny because I've never said this to anyone before, but in my first job right out of university, and I don't recall the circumstances that led to this, but the person said to me, and he wasn't really an influential person I don't consider him a super influential, or haven't considered him a super influential person until at this point in time. He said to me, nobody is going to look out for you as much as you will need to for yourself, or something along those lines. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
You will have advocates, you will have supporters, but ultimately, man, if you're not watching out for yourself and being mindful of your future and what you need to do to build the future that you want for yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you. Um, I will say that as one thing, and another thing as someone who I enjoy doing creative things, building stuff, fabricating with wood and metal, with making videos and taking photographs. When I ran my own marketing agency, I got to exercise all of these interests and make a living from it. But for those people who own, for anyone who's been sold on the idea that do whatever you love and the money will follow, I no, I it's the only times you ever hear it are when people who've managed to be successful, or who've managed to make I guess a creative life work for them financially. That's the only time you ever hear it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Uh,
there are too few of those examples. The reality is, I don't know. I mean, it's a bad piece of advice.
yeah. No, I do agree with you, especially on the first piece of advice. Have you ever heard of a, a what was he called? Jim Ron?
No.
He's basically he passed away years ago, but he's a US personal development speaker. And one of the lines he says, and it kind of sticks in my head all the time, is the major key to a better future is you. No one's going to do the work for you, realistically. You've got to put that
Yeah.
in. And if you think someone's going to hold your hand and give you new roles and opportunities without putting in the work, then you're very deluded.
Yeah. I'll cite one person. Chuck Close is a famous artist, and he said, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and do the work."
Yeah.
And that's how you derive inspiration, right? You just put in the work, and then as you do the work, you discover new things, you make mistakes, you learn lessons, and then you improve. So,
Yeah. No, perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. And Brandon, last question before you go. Where do you actually see yourself in the next 5 years?
I don't predict the future, Connor. My hope is that um, hopefully Oxeye will be much further along at that point. Um, it's impossible to say. I don't know. Hopefully hopefully healthy and happy and professionally fulfilled. That's all I can that's all I can hope for.
No, perfect. Brandon, thank you for coming on today. It's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure, Connor. Thank you so much.